One second. There we go. And we're live. Hi, everyone. We're here today. Um, Very excited with our dear friend Bob Katz. We hope you're all staying safe in these weird and interesting times. Um, yeah, I think it's the most important now that everyone is staying safe. So, um, yeah, we are here all in different locations. I'm in Miami, Jeroen is in Belgium, Emmy is in LA, and Bob is in Orlando.
Wow.
Uh, but we have this amazing technology that allows us to communicate and feel like we're in the same room,
Yeah.
except for the Space Monkeys codec issues and the live streaming brings. But other than that, I think we're all excited that we can do this. So first of all, thank you, Bob, for wanting to join us today. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man.
These days, it's I'm doing a lot of mastering. Thank goodness, because you can master from home, and my home is a residential studio of the highest quality. So I'm really lucky, really, really lucky. I'm thinking about the poor numbers of performing musicians and other things. One of my friends predicted that the record is coming back because performances as a means of income are reducing, and maybe people will sell more albums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. I mean, I definitely think in this time, these next 2 months, there's going to be a lot of people coming out with great music because that's still something you can work on while being isolated. So that's yeah, interesting times.
I wonder how I would sound singing through a mask.
I need to develop a filter for that. Yeah.
So, so Bob, well, first to start off, do you have any things you want to start off with, like from your side? We do have a few questions as well.
Well, I thought I would say that I use Dyne 1 probably these days on over 50% of the popular music masters that I make. So that's really, really good stuff.
That's great to hear. Really nice to hear. Well, thank you. So let me start off with a question, just like a bit of a technical question. Whenever you're approached or you hear about a new piece of gear, whether it's analog or digital, like what is your procedure for figuring out whether you like that tool, like from a listening point of view, testing point of view, like what are the steps you typically do? I know back in the day, I mean, I used to work for you, so I know that you go through steps of calibrating and, making sure everything is to the highest quality. Like what is your workflow for that whenever you encounter something new?
I'd love to say that I listen first, but if it's a new piece of analog gear, I'll listen briefly, and then I'll do a lot of analog measurements just to confirm performance. I have a compressor, and I started hearing that the stereo separations was very poor, and so I immediately went into measurements on it and found out that to be the case. So I contacted the designer, and he said, pack it up. I think I know what it is, and sent it to them, and came back, and the stereo soundstage was greatly improved. So I think that it's important to, at least for analog gear, to be able to measure that aspect of it. With digital processors, quite often I won't do any measurements at all, but when I have time, I'll try to do some.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a follow-up? Like, what kind of equipment do you use then? Are you precision measurement equipment, or do you have something specific, or build something yourself for it?
Okay. Now I can type in the chat window, but it won't appear on the screen. So I guess I'll.
If you go into the comments section, the right top.
Okay.
There you can post it to everyone.
Oh yeah, live comments.
All right. Oh, David Miles Huber. Good morning, everyone. Where do I can see them, but I don't know how to type a new one.
No, at the bottom you say you can put post a comment.
No,
I can't do.
Okay. No,
Harold, well, if you type it in the chat, I will copy paste it into comments.
Okay, you can do it then. All right. So in answer to your question, Yerwin, I use these days Spectra Plus, Accurate, and very rarely anything else. And for Spectra Plus, I use Prism Lyra 2 interface. It's very neutral, pretty low harmonic distortion, and I'll use that for the A to D and D to A converter to test analog gear. And I can also, it also has digital in and out, so I'll use the dig in and dig out to measure any digital gear.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Spectra Plus?
I haven't seen them, no. I worked with Audio Precision.
Well, you have a dual domain Audio Precision?
I can't remember which one it was. It was specifically for HDMI testing at the time and multi-channel.
Well, I would say it's probably digital in and out as well.
Yeah.
Spectra Plus is a poor man's Audio Precision, but the precision and quality is as good. Very, very, very high resolution.
Yeah, remember you talked to me about it, and I tested it out as well. I have Spectra Fu, so I still have that, and but yeah, Spectra Plus definitely is.
Yeah, ever since I got Spectra Plus, I haven't touched Spectra Fu.
Okay.
Yeah. This is too geeky, folks.
Well, somebody's asking how about the Trinov system?
I have nothing to say about Trinov anymore. Someday I might borrow or try it, but I'm really stuck very, very positively on Accurate and Accurate Convolver for sound system correction, really.
Okay, great. Then maybe a less technical question, since you want to change it up a bit. When it comes to mastering, what are some of the changes that you've seen, let's say in the last 20 years, when it comes to mastering? Obviously the transition from more albums to singles, but also maybe when it comes to sound quality or more low end now versus, what are some things that you've noticed in the last 20 years?
Well, more and more tools to extract information from a recording that we couldn't use before, many of which I don't use, and I think they're very tempting. Isotope has added a whole set of quote-unquote remixing tools, and I could get into the technical aspects of why those kinds of things are potentially dangerous without denigrating Isotope's motivations at all. You just have to know what's underneath the hood before you start playing with these kinds of things. For example, what is it called? One of the plugins in RX that does remixing,
like music rebalance.
Music rebalance. Okay, it does kind of a miracle job of extracting individual instruments, which I'm sure hip hoppers think, well, gee, now I don't have to send stems anymore. But I think you want to avoid tools that do miracles that couldn't be done before in many cases without understanding what the artifacts are, because they all employ that kind of a tool employs masking, the same kind of masking that's used in MP3 and AAC coding, And when you start isolating these individual components, you're going to hear artifacts. But if you put them all back together, I think, in theory, and maybe one of you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, the artifacts can go away. So maybe if you try to rebalance it a little bit, as opposed to isolating it, maybe take down the drums a little and bring up the guitar a little, you can get away with it. But I would still be very careful, and I would listen to issues like depth and separation and dimension and see if they're being lost. And a lot of users don't pay attention to those things. That I think that the first thing that you lose with many tools of all kinds, including compressors, including Dyne 1, is the depth.
Okay.
So listen for loss of depth, stereo separation. Everybody pays attention to tonal balance, but that's probably not the earliest thing that you'll lose.
Yeah. That makes sense.
What else? My God. Well, a preponderance of MS processing, which, if overused, can really mess up the mix. So if you're going to be mastering and you say, oh, gee, I think I want to equalize the center instrument a little differently, I would recommend, and I learned this from Ian Shepherd, not from Ian Shepherd, from Ian Stewart, that you really should use a linear phase equalizer when doing that, because it can change, it can phase shift otherwise it can phase shift just as much as a stereo equalizer. And when you sum it back to stereo, what does it do to the stereo image? So the stereo image and the depth can change if you try MS processing with a minimum phase equalizer. But at the same time, your linear phase EQ better be very high resolution, have a very wide impulse response, or you'll change the frequency response with that. So every one of the tools, I know that sound. I know that song. Every one of the tools, the new tools that you find, has a hidden secret behind it that the more you know, the better, the more technically inclined is. People said, well, gee, when we get to digital, it's going to be easier. But it's not. Digital audio, you really have to be cautious with, or you can really mess things up. So I guess that would be the lesson I would learn.
Okay. So, the fact is there's a lot of tools available, but you kind of have to understand what's under the hood and be able to know what you're listening for and know how to spot these things.
Yeah, for example, though, Center One is an exemplary product, and I think that the reason is that you guys have ears, and you paid attention to all the potential artifacts that could occur when you try to manipulate the center image. So I like it, and I haven't, if not pushed too hard or overused, which is always, a question. Oh, your fan just stopped.
Boy, yeah, I'm going to mute it, so I was thinking of doing that. So
that's wonderful. Boy, my whole signal to noise ratio just increased 1,000 dB. Okay, so Center One, but I was getting used to that fan. Anyway, Center One, as far as I can hear, is very much artifact free if you don't push it too far, and that's hard to do. So congratulations on that. And so that's another tool. And what else do we have? Stage One. It's a new product. You don't, and for mastering, it's more really, I think, for mixing than for mastering, but it's potentially good for mastering as well. If not overused, could be used to increase the depth and space in a recording. But the first artifact you have to watch out for is, did you lose the focus? Did the vocalist lose his or her clarity? And if you're mastering something that you did not mix, then you don't know it intimately, and you better take the time to listen to the original recording and the original mix to make certain that you haven't lost any attributes. So I would say, switch back and forth, listen to the vocal, then listen to the backup guitars, listen to each of the instruments in the balance, and see if you're disturbing the intended balance of the mix engineer before you apply center one or stage one, or to some degree, dyne one.
Okay, that makes sense. Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions from David Mouse Huber. Maybe just to kind of rephrase a bit his question, what would you what typically do you send out to, like, if you're getting a mastering project and you end up doing the mastering, like, what are your deliverables to the label or to the artist, and what do you ask from them? Like, do you still make a DDP all the time? Do you make separate deliverables for even, like, I don't know, which platforms do you focus on?
Well, it keeps on changing. The other day, I use Sonorous, which is in the Netherlands, right? DDP, you can leave it on because I think it's more annoying when you turn it on and off than if you just leave it on. Yeah. I use Sonoris's DDP reference creator because up until recently, it was a terrific way to send references to clients. But fewer and fewer clients can burn a CD. Fewer clients are interested in CDs at all. But it was a great way for them to hear the album in context. So that was the first thing. But now with Catalina on OS 10, Sonorous' DDP creator is not compatible anymore, and he has to work on it to get out of the 32-bit world. And so my client complained, what are we going to do? I can't listen to this. I can't listen to that. So now I'm getting back to sending 16-bit 44.1 wave files with each wave incorporating the space at the end of it that would go into the next track in the album. But then it goes back to the ancient question of what are they going to listen to that on? How are they going to play it back? iTunes? Can we trust iTunes? And so the integrity of the DDP reference and their ability to burn a CD from it has been lost again. It used to be a big advantage. So I guess we need a dependable application that we could send to clients where they can play on their high-end stereo systems the references that we send them. And we're back to square one again on that. And I don't know what to do. Maybe you guys can invent something, an application that people can use that they can trust. But if they're going to play it on their computers, are they going to play it on their little speakers? Do they have decent systems in their living room? Can they feed their this player to that? These are all good questions, and I don't have the full answer for that. But if David is still listening, we could get into what the final outputs are, and do I make something separate for Spotify and Tidal and all the others? And the answer is no. I try to make a master that will translate to everywhere, and it's self-defeating to try and try and meet Spotify's target, so to speak, and use that as a target, because you're going to mess up a lot of things. And in fact, if the question for Spotify comes up that they're going to take anything that you produce that's lower than about minus 14 LUFS, and they're going to turn it up, and they're going to feed it into their peak limiter. And do you want to send something that's lower? Do you want to send something that's higher that they'll turn down and they'll still peak limit? I mean, any way you look at it, Spotify needs a big makeover. So I wouldn't try to aim for Spotify. I would try to make a great sounding master that's going to translate to as many places as possible. And the next question is, what about 16-bit versus 24-bit? Well, I've been trying to get one of the biggest distributors for indies is CD Baby. And they just won't have a listen to anything that I or a number of other mastering engineers are trying to encourage them to do, which is to take the 24-bit MFIT, Mastered for iTunes Master, and use that for all the distribution services. That could make such a difference. Unfortunately, CD Baby will either take the CD that you send them, if you send them a physical CD, or the 16-bit WAV files and use them. And they say, we're doing okay, we can use the 16-bit. But in many cases, the 16-bit files that I have produced for CD are peak normalized to full scale, to 0 dB true peak. And that's the worst thing that you want to send a coded service like Spotify or Prodigy, Pandora, or any of those things, because their codecs are going to overload. So separating the CD master from the 1644, from the 24, would be so much easier if we could get the distributor to just take the lower level MFIT file and send it to all their distributions. So that, again, that's an endemic problem.
I mean, it's also something, I've run across recently of like, you're trying to make, let's say, as loud as you can. So you're really trying hard, like, I'm talking like -11 or, still reasonable, but you're really trying your hardest to not peak limit too much, not clip too much. But then the optimal way is to actually, make sure your peaks don't go over, let's say, -1 dBFS. But you work so hard to get all the levels, and then you're gonna drop one. So, what's the right place to be? I think it's always a bit tricky.
But actually, if I can just add a question on top of that to Bob, like, for example, I have for my music, and actually Robin did the mastering for the latest track. We uploaded to the distribution system, which is 24-bit file, right, Robin? It was.
Yeah.
Does that mean that every or each of those streaming platforms will basically truncate that to 16-bit some of the time, or?
Okay. I would like to know what format CD Baby, for example, who is the distributor that in your case?
The distribution part of Cobalt Music in England.
Spell it.
AWAL.
I haven't heard of them myself, so I can't answer. Okay. But I'd like to know, what format does CD Baby send to Spotify? Do they encode it first, or do they send the WAV file that we make to them? Does anyone know for sure?
I have no idea.
I don't either. No.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get that answered, and now I'll try to get it answered, but CD Baby has been notoriously uncommunicated. Now, if they send the WAV, they're going to send because they're insisting, regardless of all my and a few others that I know communications, they're going to send the 16-bit 44.1 to the streaming service. And if it's my 1644, it's going to be at full scale, and that's terrible. And I can't make a separate. It's just impractical for me to make a separate 1644 for CD and one for distribution. But I can make a separate 2444 at the MFIT level. So if we can twist CD Baby's arms and maybe some of these other distributors, we would get better results at the streaming services. That's about all I can say there.
Okay.
Or maybe I should try to make my CD masters at a lower level, and see if anybody complains.
It's a tricky. I don't think there's one size that fits all. But, we have a couple of questions. So I'm just going to do one because it's within what we're just talking about. Another one from Dave. So we're kind of stick to the same topic. He's asking about delivery to you. Like what do you recommend mix engineers or people who send you music in terms of sample rates, how much compression, what should be the peak level that they send, things like that.
Okay, very good. Let's start with your mix files. I think if it sounds good, it is good, but I wouldn't apply any peak limiting, any digital peak limiting to those files. Hi, Dave. Good, nice image of yours there. So anything goes, but definitely, I'd like to see that so I can apply. Thanks. 24-bit or 32-bit float increasingly. If you want to send your 32-bit float original mix, if it's coming off of your console, go right ahead, for me at least. And at the original sample rate of your session, no upsampling or downsampling. Sample rates, I'm liking to see 48K and up. No more 44.1 anymore. I think it sounds better and performs better. And increasingly, I'm seeing 96K, maybe 20% of the stuff that comes into me. Now, the no compression, I wouldn't say that per se. If your mix depends on a mix bus compressor, either to glue it to some degree or to or as part of your mix process, I wouldn't reject it automatically. If you're concerned about it, send me, as I always say, I'm happy to listen to one mix at no charge and give my comments on it. If I think that it sounds squishy, I'm not afraid to mention it. And if it's because of a bus compressor that you're using, I might mention it. But if that's part of the sound you intend, I'll say no more. But if you applied a peak limiter just for the purposes of making the mix louder, I would say it's probably not a good idea. And these days, some mix engineers are pushing their putting peak limiters in, and with gain reductions of 3 to 6 dB in order to compete with mastered product. And as a mastering engineer, I couldn't do a thing with it, and I wouldn't want to. It's only going to add more distortion to what's already there. So it's not a very good practice. But like I said, compressors as part of your mix tool set are probably going to be just fine. Send me a mix and we'll check it out.
Great, thank you. Then another question from Clint, whether you ever use headphones for mastering, and if yes, then are there any you recommend?
Clint, no, negative, 9, yet. There are many reasons why not to use headphones for either mixing or mastering. I think as a secondary reference, if you're having a little bit of discomfort with your monitoring and feeling that your loudspeakers are not telling you everything, then I could name a couple of very good headphones that are quite accurate tonally, and as a secondary reference, I think they could work. I'm a big fan of Odyssey, spelled Audeze, and you can put that up, Robin. And there's an inexpensive pair that has come out for $399 that I highly recommend, the LCD one. If you've got lots of money to burn, I would jump immediately from the LCD one to the LCD 4. Now that's a difference of $3,600. I'm sure there's something in between. There's something from Hi-Fi Man that's in the $2,000 category that's pretty decent. But I would jump to the high-end Odyssey. I know my friends at Odyssey won't like me to say this, but I'm not anymore a fan of their intermediate models. But they really hit the nail on the head with the LCD one. It's a great price performance product for tone and impact. It's a planar magnetic headphone, and it's semi-circumaural. I could show you a pair if you want to see them while we're talking. I'll get up and pull them out. But I don't use them as the absolute reference. I use headphones for pleasure these days. I don't use them in the mastering room at all. I don't need to switch to any alternate speakers or alternate monitors in any way. So you should seek to try and get the most accurate speakers you can, and use headphones if you need to right now, but your goal should be. The reasons why, headphones change the stereo image, the depth, there are tools supposedly to fix that kind of thing, which I haven't really tried too much. The correlator tools that simulate stereo imaging for put speaker imaging into headphones. I just don't believe in them, but maybe somebody could convince me. I haven't dared to even try them, so I can't claim that it's due to a listening prejudice on my part. It's just due to a prejudice. Headphones exaggerate the stereo image. They also exaggerate the transients, and they change the ratio of direct to reverberant sound. What's not to love? You know?
All right.
These are the LCD ones. I'll get them out. Go ahead, keep talking.
Well, I don't have. I have a follow-up question or a different question, but yeah, there we go. Nice.
$400. Can't go wrong. Very, very good tonal balance. They worked really hard on these.
Great. Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Sigurdor about the global band trim function, which is something we discussed before. So, and how it works with band compensation gain. So.
Okay. Why don't you talk about band compensation gain, and I'll talk about global band trim, because that is a topic I wanted to get into in this talk anyway.
Great. Jeroen, do you want to talk about band compensation gain?
No, I'll quick one. First of all, global band trim and band compensation gain are not related, so they don't influence each other. The global band trim is simply an additional gain or trim on top of the 5 gain sliders that you have, or the faders that you have for the bands. Band compensation gain is it's really like an offset function based on the threshold and ratio. So it gives you a little extra gain if needed when you have a very low threshold, high ratio. So when the compressor would be really kicking in and lowering the volume, the band compensation gain will give you a fixed offset amount based on those 2 slider settings for each band. So it's not because we changed the name, by the way. It used to be, I believe, Auto Gain, but that was working confusing. We noticed because it does not do any automatic. There's no automatic algorithm that's changing by time. It's really a simple offset based on threshold and ratio setting to give you to get you more into the ballpark of like a 0 dB setting, so you can have the faders working in a more usable range around the 0 dB setting. And in Dynamo 3, just to finish up, we added an on-off button, so you can switch off the band compensation if you don't like it, or if you don't want to use it, or if it's not beneficial to you. So you can also switch it off, and then you have what you see is what you get.
I have band compensation gain turned off for me, and it's more compatible with previous presets that I had also. So I'm glad that you put it in as a switch.
I think it's very useful for like more creative, as in mixing, like because like as Jeroen said, the idea was like how we originally, some people are sometimes using Dyn1 to compress the bass, 30, 40 dB, and then your fader would just be like, you would want to boost plus 12 dB, and that's the max. You couldn't go higher, so then you were out of range and you couldn't really hit the sweet spot. So that was the reason we added originally the band compensation gain.
So it's kind of a gain boost to the existing individual faders.
Exactly.
Yep.
Ooh, maybe there's a better way to work that out rather than making it a separate hidden control.
I mean, in the end, you set the gain, as in the band gain, you set it, by ear of how you want your tonal balance to be. So we figured, we tried to get people more in the ballpark of, around the same lines, but yeah, it's.
But it doesn't
turn
change.
it off as well.
Does it change the meaning of the individual wet faders? Like if it's set to -40 and I turn on the band compensation gain, I get more level, don't I?
Yes, you get more level.
Yeah. I think there must be a better way to do that.
Okay, we couldn't come up with one, but.
Well, I'm not the inventor, so I can make my comments without worrying about it. Okay, but let me talk about the global band trim. That was actually a result of some long discussions between Robin and me to begin with, because for Dyn1 3 is a CPU hog, and in my DAW for mastering DAW, which is Sequoia, I was originally using, and still am occasionally, Dyn1 version 2 on each object, and there was enough bandwidth or CPU headroom, I guess is the word, maybe, in Sequoia for me to put, say, 10 instances of Dyn1 version 2, one on each object. And if I needed to, I could cut an object up and use, usually it was maybe to change EQ. I wasn't usually changing the settings of Dyn1, but there were 2 instances suddenly on Dyn1 on 2 objects that were married into one. And pretty soon, well, it wasn't a problem with Dyn1 version 2, but version 3, which is a big CPU hog, I found that object-based technique soon became really difficult, if not impossible. And I've got a 12-core CPU running at 3-point-something gigahertz, so it's no slouch. So you guys have made a very, very serious processor. So I said, well, what am I going to do? I need to automate from one song to the next the settings of the levels of the sliders. Maybe I want it off on one and on another song, or a little tiny bit for a purist song, or whatever, or push the heck out of it on another song. You never know. And so you guys came up with the global band trim, and you did it very cleverly, and I'd like to take credit for the idea of turning percent into direct dB offset. So you guys do all the log conversion behind the scenes, and all the user has to do is add or subtract, which is really, really great. Let me give an example. And it would be wonderful if you make a diagram and put that in the manual. Let's say that you have 10 songs. If you load your preset, or if you start it off so that all the wet mix faders, what do you want to call those faders? The wet mix level or what?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call them the wet mix faders to minus 50 dB. Then you have a plus and minus 50 dB offset for them. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on my Sequoia DAW, and you can tell me if it's true for other DAWs, that appears as plus up to plus and minus 50 quote percent, but it's really dB. So if I set it to minus 50, that turns off the Dyne 1, because it's minus 50 and minus 50 equals minus 100, and that's really off. And so it's really easy, and it affects all the faders at once. There are some loopholes in this automation, and I'll get into it, but let's see if you guys have any reactions to that approach to automation.
Yeah, I think from the comments, I think not many people like use, because I think it's like your workflow in Sequoia probably based on also how Sequoia works.
Right, exactly. I don't know. Go ahead.
I want to quickly add this percentage is only in Sequoia as far as I know. In most DAWs, you will see the dB label being printed, but it somehow isn't supported in Sequoia. Hence, it stays percentage.
That would be just wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm just so glad, though. I mean, you must have done something special for me when you developed this, because most of the time, percent is going to be a linear function, and dB is a log function. I don't know how you did it, but it's coming up dB.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of emails back and forth, so like you were asking a lot, so that we made it happen.
I do remember it used to be minus 48 to plus 48 dB in the original prototype of the Dyne 1.3, and then your feedback was it doesn't map nicely on this percentage in Sequoia, so that's why we made it 50. So that's the reason why it's minus 50.
And 50 is an easy number in the sense that if you want to automate all the faders at once, would you agree that for every DAW, if you want to automate all the faders at once, you have to use the global band trim, right?
Yes.
Yeah. If you want to move them with one input, like only moving, then
yeah. I mean, it's awkward to do it as individuals, I have to say. Okay, so I mean, if you start at minus 50 and you want minus 70, you just set it for minus 20, and anybody can do that arithmetic in their head. Okay, but now what I wanted to talk about is taking Dyne 1 to the future as to how to handle some other exceptions in terms of automation. You ready?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. I would say 10 to 20% of the time, I want to take the bass fader, the first fader, and give it a little offset compared to the rest. Sometimes the compressed mix gets a little too fat in the bass due to psychoacoustics. And so I will unlock that first fader, come down anywhere from 1/10 of a dB to 1 or 2 dB, and then lock it back again. Now, for the most part, I mean, we might hope that could be applied, that offset could be applied to all 10 songs in the album. But if one song doesn't want that, then I have to figure out how to automate the change so that fader number 1 is equal to the rest on that song. And I'd like to hear some suggestions from you as to how we might deal with that.
But if you, let's say the low band is in the first song, it's I don't know, -50, and all the other bands at -45. So it's 5 dB less of blend or whatever it is. But then in another song you wanna have it be the same, so you want it at -45 as well. Then you can just get the automation parameter for the low frequency band and add 5 dB in for that song alone, and then drop it again after the end of the song.
Okay. What if all the faders are locked together? Is that gonna move? They won't move them all.
No, if automation is written, that overrides the locking.
Okay. That's a potential solution. I just wonder if it gets a little messy, but I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, I think that would solve the
That
problem.
actually works. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I sent you a snapshot automation approach to Pro Tools. Did you get a chance to read it?
I did. I read it just before.
What did you think of it?
I mean, it reminds me of the old days of, you would have an analog console, and maybe you'd want to have a mix for, I'm thinking mixing now, but you want to have a mix for the chorus, and then you want to kind of completely do something different for the verses, and you want to be able to go from one into the other depending on where you are in the song. So that approach, I guess, is similar to what you're trying to achieve, being able to say, okay, this is my snapshot for this section, then this is my snapshot for this section, and then ideally probably even blend between the two snapshots and not, go from one into the other right away. Kind of how objects work in Sequoia.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, the problem is with all the different hosts. I mean, that has been an obstacle for everything we do. Everybody deals with things completely different, and yeah, our goal of trying to support as many platforms as we can, it's definitely not been so easy.
Yeah. Now, okay, so let me ask this question, and I probably already know the answer. What are the chances that you can maintain the quality and fidelity of the filters in Dyn13, but get the CPU load down low enough so that we could revert in Sequoia at least to object-based Dyn13?
I'll let Jeroen answer that, but I mean, I think every gain we've done, I mean, like, Jeroen and the team has been spending a lot of time, but I think we've come to a point where every increase, like, if we optimize it for like 1%, then like we can throw a party and party the whole weekend. So yeah. It's really small increments now, and I mean, we're gonna keep working on this for the longest time.
Don't kill yourselves. You're a small company, and there's a limit to just how much dedication you can do. I'm kind of upset with Sequoia because, in theory, if you put an object on track 1 and an object on track 2, they should go to 2 different cores. I'm just not seeing big advantages to that so far in Sequoia.
I can add to it, but I think Robin already summed it up. There's only so much you can do. We have some ideas, but that would require quite some rework without even being sure that we would gain maybe 5% CPU. So it wouldn't, for most people, it wouldn't even be noticeable. So you kind of get to a point where it is what it is. We use long filtering. We didn't compromise in the beginning, and we try to keep that. CPU quality and will go up, CPU speed and so on will go up in the coming years. So give it another 5 years and it will be a complete different picture. And on top of that, I wanted to add that what we did see is there are quite some differences between CPU types amongst if we compare them. So we did have some use of some tickets, some music reports, who couldn't even run one Dyne-1 on a particular system, while on a test system, we would run like 30, 40 in parallel.
Really? Do you
so,
recommend a particular CPU at this time?
Anything from like the latest Intel family. That's like, I'm running a MacBook Pro at the moment. That's like the kind of default test that we always do. Does it run on a MacBook, and how?
Would you recommend an i9 over an i7?
I think I do. I think Robin can speak to that. He's running an i9 at the moment.
I mean, I'm very happy with my, like, Yurin has the i7, I have the i9, and yeah, like, I mean, on the mixed session, I can run easily like half Dyne-1 on 6 or 7 buses at the same time in ultra quality.
In Pro Tools?
Yes, in Pro Tools.
That's encouraging.
So yeah, that's
yeah.
Because indeed, on top of that, the DAW makes a difference. The buffer size that you use, the audio interface, everything works together, and you can tune a system. Although I can't go into details, I'm not a specialist, but I do know that you can make a system perform better with certain tweaks. But I have to refer to Google and specialized forums for that. But that are things to be done. But it's a whole topic on itself. Yeah.
Can I move to the future? Can I dream 5 years from now and coronavirus is cured and now our CPUs are 20 gigahertz and
yeah, I mean, it will happen. So it's just gonna
someday. Yeah.
Then we have another question, which I think kind of also falls in line with what we've been discussing. And that kind of goes back to the whole philosophy of Dyne-1, which, Bob, I mean, we've discussed for a long time. I've seen this request a few times, as in, like, I would love to have like parallel blends per fader, but I think it's very important to understand that, you know, the concept of this was that it's either, you know, a normal compressor, as in you don't have any dry signal and you can compress each band, or you have your dry signal as is and then add in the wet signal. I haven't really thought of or come up with a solution that you know would allow you to change that parallel blend on a fader by fader basis, because then it's not the dry signal anymore, because you would have to filter that as well. So I don't know.
Okay,
We've gotten this request a few times, but
I have a suggestion. Now, right now, I don't like to think in percentage, so let's talk in dB. Do we have a limit? What, 12 o'clock or what?
Yeah, we should. Yeah, in the next 5 minutes we should.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll try to get this explained as quickly as possible for Sigurdor. It's a good one. Right now, your wet dry mix is 0 dB dry and up to 0 dB wet. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you could go even higher with wet, but okay.
Okay. Now, you could totally change that architecture so that it was like a balance control, but still in dB. So that if it was like a rotary fader, let me just take you through this possibility. If it was like a rotary fader, when it's in the middle, the mix is 0 dB wet, 0 dB dry. And when you go counterclockwise, the wet stays this. Let me see. You're going towards dry. The dry stays the same, 0 dB, but the wet goes down in 1 dB increments. When you go clockwise, the wet stays at 0 dB, but the dry attenuates in 1 dB increments on a single control.
Okay.
Like a balance control. A balance control in dB, though.
Okay. I mean, definitely food for thought. I just like, I think, you know, if you add too many controls that are related to this dry wet, then it gets confusing as well. So figuring out the best way, which, I mean, for me personally, I love how Dyne-1 3 works, and for me, it's always like giving me the results was thinking of. But I mean, it's definitely good to.
Well, right
think
now,
about it.
I think the only thing that Sigador is missing is 100% wet. Okay, which you can never get because there's always some percentage of dry.
No, because then you turn off the dry signal. You can turn off, make it a normal compressor, which would be 100% wet.
But what is the ratio in the parallel mode? The highest you can push the wet fader.
Plus 12, right?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Sigador if that's if in using Dyne 1.3 if he needed to go further than plus 12 in parallel mode.
Actually, he's just saying that my parallel blend faders was to suggest what to call them, but yeah, so I don't think he was referring to this problem I talked about, but I have had it a few times where, like two times I think, where people asked about it. But
that's a good word, a good term for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Great. Let me see. I think that's
2 more minutes.
yeah, I think we should wrap up, but
yeah, we start off slow and then we taper off.
yes, but well, first of all, thanks everyone who was here, like in the chat and adding comments on YouTube and Facebook. This was actually a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. Love talking to you, Bob. You know that. So yeah, thanks for taking the time and being here.
Gracias, Emiliano.
Gracias a ti, Bob.
Okay. Tak, Jeroen.
Dankjewel, Bob. Dankjewel.
I don't understand. And Robin, you're a mongrel. Do you know that word?
No, but
he's a mixture of French, English, Spanish, Dutch.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks.
Cool.
Thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
And,
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
All right.
You're the best.
Take care.
Okay. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good one.